You are listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast, hosted by Tom Baker. Thank you for listening. Your position has been triangulated. Drone army has been dispatched to your location. Commencing attack run in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast. When I finally, after a bunch of back and forth, decided to start this podcast, I was thinking of who are the people that I would want to talk with. And this guy that's with me today was at the very top of my list. He has inspired me and helped me get my ass in gear, not only by his encouragement, but by his honesty and his overall drive to get out there and create. My guest today is the epitome of an in-the-trenches cinematographer/director. He has lensed, directed, and worked on countless local Springfield, Missouri independent films. He's won numerous awards for his work. He's the owner of Valley High Pictures, and in its inception, he did a lot of shooting weddings. Now he's moved into bigger and grandioso things, shooting films. He's color graded and edited a bunch of local stuff. He works a 40-hour-a-week job on top of all that, and he is one of the nicest dang guys I know, and I absolutely love talking with him. And I want to welcome to the microphone Mr. David Watson.
Hello.
Take two, right?
I'm just sitting over here like, man, that sounds so cool. Oh, dude, like I'm gonna have you send me that.
I will.
This is what I put in my tombstone.
I'll play it as
Tom
like
said.
I'll play it as a trailer, and you can like download it later on and everything.
Yes, I love it.
How are you been doing?
I'm good, man. Just living the life of a small filmmaker. So,
how is that working for you now?
that's good. I mean, COVID caused some problems there for a little while. We all kind of set in our hands for an itch to get back out there. But I feel like things are really starting to finally get back to normal. I mean, I've shot several things in the last couple months, and I think even Hollywood's getting back to shooting things. So thank God, I'm ready for movies to be back in theaters. So
the itch.
Yeah, the itch.
It's the itch. You can only hold it back for so long, and then you got to get back into it.
It's true. I had a couple people like reach out to me. Colin was one of them. Like, he's like, I've got this script. It's like 7 pages. Can we just go? Like, I just want to go make it. And so we did. And
now you all did your road reel film,
oh, yeah,
right?
We did.
And they just released the winners of that the other day.
They did. We actually, Tyler and I, he was the director and I shot it, but he and I watched the live stream. And it was really funny because not that we thought we would win anything, but we were proud of our film, and there were a lot of really good movies. Oh my gosh, there were some really, really cool ones. And, but we were watching it, and so like the first category, which is not even something we would have even qualified for, it was comedy or something, and it was like the winner. They were like, yeah, we spoke to the winner, and I was like, Tyler, did anybody ever contact you? And he's like, nope. I'm like, well, guess we know what we won. But they had like runners up and stuff like that still got prizes that I guess was a surprise to everybody. They didn't interview those people.
Oh, that's cool.
So we didn't win anything. Obviously, there's like, I don't even know how many thousands of people all over the world, but yeah, there
was a bunch. There was a ton,
and we did ours, and we just shot it in one day at Tyler's house.
I liked it. I thought you guys did a really good job on it.
Thank you. Yeah, we had fun. We got to Brad. I don't know if you know Brad. He got to he helped gaff the Vincent's Vow. He got to help, and we got to play with a bunch of his cool gear, and so
he's a great gaffer too.
He's so good.
He's very precise.
Oh my gosh, he's like in the kitchen, this kitchen scene, and I look over there, and he's got a notepad, like he's diagrammed it out just for himself. He just wants to remember things that he shot and how many lights and where they were and all that stuff. And
really?
But it's really nice because it's like one of those times that most of the time it's me doing it and Tyler doing it ourselves. And so, and Tyler said, he's usually helping me do it. And it's nice to just tell somebody what I want, and they just, you know what I mean? Like, we start to throw lights up, and then we start to, we're like, I'm kind of figuring out what looks good and what doesn't. I don't have to always just. It was just nice to have another set of hands and somebody who knew their gear and knew like what, how to get, what I wanted. Like, okay, let's soften this, or let's diffuse this, or bounce this, or whatever. And he just he just knows. And plus, he got to try out his 5,000 watt RE light that he built. So
He built it?
yeah, it runs off. We had to hook it up to the dryer outlet.
Are you serious?
I'm not even kidding you, man. It's humongous. I mean, it's huge. It's that big around, and
You know,
so
not to get off on, but on RE lights, like I just did that film with John Voles.
yeah,
What was that? Gosh, it was a month ago. But they had this RE light outside, and I was standing in the doorway, and I could feel the heat off of it.
Yep,
And that thing was a good 20 feet away.
Yep.
And I could feel the heat off of it. And it did. It felt just like the sun coming through the trees.
Yes.
I was like, that thing is
so.
And I've always been kind of one of those people who are like, yeah, Ari, whatever. I don't need it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But I tell you what,
There's a reason.
there is a reason
Yes, I
that
totally
people
get it.
like get all jonesing over RE lights because they are,
Yes.
they're just, I mean, they will change
They will.
day or night to day.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
And especially if you're just needing, like, if you're wanting it to be like I don't know, it's a horror or it's in an old house or it's a Western, so it's dusty and you just need some beams of light. Sometimes some of the stuff I have won't suffice. Like I've got
Most of my stuff.
right. I've got a couple of 1Ks that are just like I call it the eBay brand. They're just the knockoffs.
Yeah.
They look like Ari until you get up there and realize it doesn't say Ari on it. But it's like, and they're fine. They're kind of hit and miss. I've gone through a bunch of bulbs, but anyways, they'll sometimes work. But man, having that 5K, we only tried it really once. It just, for what we were shooting, we just didn't need it. But he was just anxious to play with it. But
That's
but
why I like those old Toda lights. Do you remember the old Toda lights?
Yes.
You burn your hand on them, but those things were awesome.
That's how these are. You have to you turn it off and you just got to leave it alone, or you got to put gloves on because it's you can cook an egg on it.
Yeah, it's definitely not a run and gun setup.
No, it's
because
not
after
at
you're
all.
done, you gotta let it sit for about 15, 20 minutes.
Yes,
or you'll
absolutely.
burn your gear down.
Exactly. So
Well, so you've been working on that, and then that 7-page script that Kong had. That was a separate project, right?
yeah, and it was It's funny because it was 7-page script and we were going to shoot it, and then one of the actresses ended up having to get a COVID test, and she wasn't going to get the results back in time. So we actually still shot something we just shot at Sun. You remember he shot Sun?
Yeah.
We did he basically did like a 2-page Sun Part 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we had
Ray
Robertson came
Ray
down
Roberson.
he was actually going to be shooting something the next week in St. Louis, and so he was actually in town from Georgia anyways.
Oh, cool.
So it was literally 2 pages, or maybe it was 3, but so we ended up just doing that. I think there's maybe 4 lines of dialogue in the whole thing. It was almost like it was super simple. We shot it out at Kong's farm, but
Art house piece, kind
of, yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have, I don't think I turned on a single light. I mean, it was all outside.
Really?
It was all just like natural light, what we had. And
of. Did you shoot it with the A7?
yeah, I did. And actually, I rented one of the Surrey Surrey.
Oh, the
50
anamorphic?
millimeter anamorphic F1.8.
That's right.
I think I may have told you about. Yeah,
you got the Sony. I got the Micro Four Thirds.
Yeah, so I rented one of those off of lensreynolds.com, which is a great service. I love those guys. But I saw the other day actually that they've got the 35 millimeter.
They say it's
now.
even better than the 50.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
And that they shoot it a little bit wider. It's so I think the 35 shoots at about 26 is what the site says. But I love that lens. It's fast, and you get that really. I love just putting it in Premiere and stretching. I'm like, oh god, it looks so cool.
It does.
I geeked out over it totally.
It's got great bokeh too.
It does, yes. And I even got one little lens flare shot that I was just sort of randomly shooting something. Kong put it in there, so for me, I was like, yeah,
that's cool. So has he edited it?
He sent me a rough cut of it, like maybe, like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. I don't know if he's done anything else on it, but I've helped him shoot a couple of. I was there day before yesterday helping him shoot something for like 20 minutes. It was really quick, and then I helped him last Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago shoot one of his Bobby Kong things.
Really?
Yeah, that he puts out.
Yeah.
So it was just in his house. It took us about 4 hours, and we knocked it out. But it was really funny.
That's
because he does all the split screen. It's like it's just him and it's just Bobby
talking
Kong
to himself.
Yeah, it's so great. He does. He sent me a rough cut of that too. It looks so good. It's funny. They have to
Well,
sit
you
on the
get some of
couch
those.
and-
We'll have to.
Yes.
Since we're putting them in the podcast, I'll have to link out to them.
Yeah, definitely. So he's got
So-
some funny stuff.
I want to talk about, and just full transparency, and I want to let everyone know, this is the second time that David has been in here, because the first one was my actual very first like podcast that I did for this. Went through, I think it clocked in at about 4 hours,
Something
and
like that,
I had to edit down so much of it. And you know, the enemy of done is perfect, and it is one of those things that
I love that.
that haunts me so much. But I think one of the things that I whenever I got through that first podcast and got through stuff, I started to become inspired, and I got a little bit more focused. And I think that sometimes the take two is a good idea. And so what I wanted to do, bringing you in today, is I wanted to talk about kind of your creative process, but I also want to talk about some of the, lack of a better word, demons that you have to deal with in that creative process. More so for myself, just to hear, you know, kind of what you go through, but I think it's good for the audience to be able to hear too some of those struggles that we all probably have, unpackage them and talk about it.
Yeah.
So it may get deep, it may get heavy, but I think that's...
If I get choked up or
Yeah,
tears,
you know.
if I get tissues. That made David cry.
So talk a little bit about your creative process. And I know that you have a lot of influence on film and things like that, but you know, where does it come from? When did the itch start? Let us have it.
Sure, man. I mean, it's funny because I see young people, you know, people who are doing this, and thought, man, I wish I had started doing this when I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. But when I was that age, all you had was a camcorder, and I remember messing around with it and trying to sort of make movies, but you just didn't have, you know, anybody that had audio. You just didn't have access to that
Let
stuff.
alone trying to edit it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. How it's impossible. You literally had to just make it all work in one take on your. It was impossible. So, so like the digital revolution happened, you know, with like the DSLRs, and those would shoot 1080p. That's when it started with me. Was like the late 2010s, probably 2014, 15 or whatever. I'd done photography, and then always loved movies. And then it was like I started realizing that there were these movies out there, like on Vimeo and YouTube, where people were making really awesome looking movies and short films with these cameras. And I was like, dude, this is so, because I loved photography, and I loved that control over the image that you got in photography when you learned to get in manual mode, basically. And so, I mean, that's what, like, that was hugely inspiring to me, because I was like, I have it now. It's in my hand. And then you start to look around, you realize that there's microphones you can buy that are basically pretty cheap. The little Zoom H1s that will record, that do a really good job. I mean, I'm like, dude, you can make movies. And so, of course, at that time, you kind of mentioned it in the kind of the intro, I guess, is that I started with weddings because I didn't know anybody. I wanted to make movies, but I knew no one, absolutely no one that did them. And around here, I had no clue. And so I was like, where's my creative outlet going to be now, other than just making short films about my kids? It's like, so I was like, weddings. I'd photographed weddings. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do weddings. Cool. So shot one of those, and that kind of took off for a little bit. For about 3 or 4 years, I think I shot about 50 weddings. And then somewhere along the way, I made friends with a guy, Thomas, and we knew each other for probably a year and a half before either one of us figured out that we were both had an interest in filmmaking, which is so funny because we saw each other. We worked together every day, and it took us that long to finally get around to it. So, but I helped him on something, and then it was like, then I started to meet people. Then I had met, I was like, there's 2 or 3 people. That's where I met Ducon, was on that first set where I was just a PA, a grunt. I was just hauling gear.
He's referring to Ducon Williams,
yeah.
who is the director, writer, lead actor of Vincent's Vow.
Yes.
That just won
Best Picture.
Picture at the International Christian Film Festival,
Yeah.
and David was the director of photography for that film.
I was. So it all came full circle.
Well, you know, that kind of raises an interesting idea. Do you feel like, going back, you said you started, doing films of your kids or, whatever, and then all of a sudden you got into weddings.
Mm-hmm.
Is it kind of like that implied challenge that you have to impose upon yourself to go to the next level each time? And after you get to after you've kind of played your gig in the weddings, you're like, okay, I need to go to the next step and the next step. Do you kind of feel that
Sure.
may be?
I mean, I definitely do, especially going from weddings into filmmaking, because like I'm in groups on Facebook, filmmaking groups on Facebook, and a lot of these groups are people that are actually working on bigger productions, but they may not be like a DP, but they're their first ACs or their what they may not be the main people, but they're doing this, or they're at least on these big sets. And one of the things that all these groups, it seems like the butt of every joke is always, well, I'm a cinematographer, quote unquote, because I did weddings, And I remember when I first started doing it, I saw that somewhere, and I thought, oh no, because cinematography is the image is what I was passionate about, not even so much the storytelling, which obviously that's extremely important. And you can make something look good, but who cares if you don't want to watch it? If the story's terrible. But that's where my passion lied, and I just remember thinking, oh no, like I'm just a joke. Like I'm not even like this. I'm not really a cinematographer, and so that was the challenge, going from always shooting just natural light, whatever was in front of you at a wedding. That's all you have. It's going to trying to learn lighting. So a lot of those things I did with my kids was lighting. Like I got lights, and I lit things, and I tried to like learn, and it was always just garbage, but like it just got me used to that kind of stuff. And then moving into short films, and then Vincent's Vow, and then I really started to get to like use things and get to, I remember being on Vincent's Vow, there was like having high powered lights, like having a 1K or whatever. Like I'd never used one of those, and it was like I always just had to make do. And now I had it, and I just remember being like, this is so cool. Like I can actually do these things. I can actually make it look this way. And so that was a lot of fun.
But if one of those lights went out,
oh yeah,
you knew how to fix it.
Right, sure.
Because you started from the bottom and you worked up.
Exactly, because I was like, okay, well, that's all right, because here's how I do it. Here's how I would have done this. And
I can see the opposite, like what you're saying. I could see the opposite of someone that starts out in like film school, right? Mm-hmm. And they have probably a Blackmagic Ursa, camera that they're using, and they've got a couple of cinema lenses that they all use. They probably got a couple ARRI lights, and they got more gear than your typical, independent film crew is going to have on some things. And so they start at that point, and that's how they got indoctrinated into, filmmaking. Yep. But then when they go back down, it's kind of like, how do I get that to work? So I can definitely see two downsides to starting out, in film school and getting out in the real world and having to learn how to make films that way, or starting out at the bottom and going up.
Right.
That's definitely a harder road to go, but
for sure.
I think,
it's a lot of like just doing stuff by myself, like just sitting in a house.
It's a lot of feeling stupid sometimes.
Right. Like thinking, I'm so glad nobody can see this. Thank God nobody can see me like not being able to figure this out or trying it this way, and it looks terrible. But it's like that's how you learn. And to your point about the people who go to film school, and I'm not sure you'd agree. If you can go to film school, cool, that's great,
good for you.
Everything I've ever heard or seen, because that's one of those questions is like, should I go to film school? And there's so many people who I've seen say that have gone to film school say the biggest thing they got out of film school was the networking, is that you met other people, and then that's what helped you. Like they're like, we didn't learn anything until we actually went and started making our own stuff, and so we're making our own stuff. You and I. People who are probably going to hear this are just like us. They're going to be people who are just, like me, who work and have kids, and and then you just sort of have to squeeze in this like immense passion that you have for filmmaking. And thank God I can do it. I'm so thankful every day. Anytime anybody asks me to do anything, I'm just like, I just want to scream to that, because I'm like, yay, I get to do something else.
And I will say something else, and actually, since the last time we talked, and of course, when I edited that 4-hour podcast, I got to listen to it quite a few times, which was, and you have a beautiful voice, David.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
But one of the things that I realized was that you've worked like crazy hard outside of your regular 40-hour-a-week job over the course of about 5 years, right?
Right. Yep.
You've worked extremely hard. And it took working extremely hard for 5 years, not worrying necessarily so much about the money, but focusing on the craft. And so when people look at this and listen to this and say, well, in 5 years, if I start shooting weddings and do this, then I'm going to be able to shoot a feature film. That is not accurate at all.
It's not.
Because I will just tell you, like, knowing David the way that I know him, he is working all the time on something. If he's not editing it, he's filming it. If he's not filming it, he's tinkering.
Right.
It's an obsession.
Sure.
Would that be would that be fair?
Yes, like I was explaining one time, somebody asked me about it. It was like just somebody I just randomly kind of met. Like I was with some friends, and then there was another person there. It was like, I think it was their girlfriend or this guy's wife or something. I can't even remember, but we were kind of talking about it, and I literally was explaining how much, it was like, why do you guys love doing this stuff so much? And it's like, it hit me. I'm like, this is an obsession. Like, that's what it is with me. Like, even if I'm not editing something or shooting something or tinkering, I'm watching something or I'm reading something or I'm listening to something.
Total absorption.
Yes.
Total absorption.
I've used those two words so many times. Total absorption. I get so, like, I want to get on. There's podcasts I listen to. There's YouTube channels that I watch all the time. And if I'm not shooting something, then I'm watching what somebody else is doing.
I think it's pretty accurate to say that there are so many pieces that are involved in making a film.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I mean, when you talk about it just from the simple aspect of the technical side of the camera.
Sure.
And that's just the camera. That's one piece of the whole process.
Yep.
And then we're not even talking about the fun stuff yet. Yep. Then there's the lighting, and then there's the sound, and then there's, crew, and there's so many stinking elements on this. And it's not that this process got complicated because of Hollywood. The process is it's inherently complicated.
Yes, it is. Yep.
The camera is basically troubleshooting. The camera is troubleshooting light.
Yep.
Is what it's doing.
Exactly what it's doing. Yep.
And you are the operator of that for the most part. Now, cameras are getting better.
They definitely
that they don't have to. You don't have as many obstacles with that. But just that alone, it's complicated.
It is.
And it takes a very left-right brain type of person to work on it. Part of that can be trained. The other part, who knows? The verdict's still out on it, whether it can be trained. The creative side, I think everybody has a creative bone. It's just the degree in which they can be creative. It's just a matter of being creative and technical at the same time.
Yep, totally agree. And I think...
And you need help.
Right.
So therefore you have to have a crew to do it.
Yes, you do. So absolutely. And creative and where you're creative and technical, I think, especially as a cinematographer, has to go hand in hand. Yeah. You can't just turn a camera on and put it in auto and expect it. You may have great ideas. I want it to look this way, but you also have to be able to then manipulate that camera to make it do what you want. So yeah, definitely.
Well, and it's like, Roger Deakins' wife.
Yeah.
And James. Me and my wife were talking about this in our first podcast. It was like, it's good to have that person around because they do keep track of those things that you can't keep track of. And so that's why I think it's very important that if you are a cinematographer, don't do it on your own. Have somebody that is kind of that counterpoint to everything that you're doing, and they're keeping track of those things that you don't like to keep track of. Yep. It's like I remember when we were working on that Pushing Envelopes film, and Madison Strain came in, and you're getting shots. You got a shot list you got to get through. I think we did was it like 8 or 9 pages, a day, which is ridiculous amount of pages to do. And so we got through and we did it. And I remember I was sitting there looking at the frame, trying to get it going. And Madison saw something up in the upper corner of the frame. And he was like, "Hey, do you want that in the shot?" And at first, my first instinct was like, "Yeah, whatever, we'll fix it." And then I thought about it for a second. It's like, "Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it." And I think that's important on set, is to have that second set of eyes, just like it's important
definitely
to have that second set of eyes when you're writing a script,
Yep.
going through, and there's so many plus sides to having that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That the teamwork makes the dream work.
That's exactly right. It's and it's funny because like I remember Madison on Vincent's Vow, because he first AD'd pretty much all of that, and I remember so many times. It's like, because you're so go because you especially on that, we were trying to shoot so much, and it's a very involved and it's a kind of a complicated story that he was telling,
Right.
and like 40 speaking parts. It was just a lot going on, all kinds of. So I'm just worrying about a lot of times, like, what is it exposed right? Does it look good? Or does their face, like that? And then it's like, then Madison's like, "Hey, we can see or this," and it's like you have to
have it. You have to have it.
Yes, you have to. And so, like I said, filmmaking is so many moving parts, and there's no like, you can't make a movie with, you can't leave a part out. You can't leave sound out. I mean, unless like it's a silent movie, but most you can't not have sound.
Well, it's just the amount of setup that you have for one shot,
yes,
and so many elements in it that if you screw it up and you get to the edit bay with it, you're like, "Oh my God, I got to set all that back up again."
Yes, dude, I know.
Or I got to go to a really weird close up,
Yeah, yes.
Well, and that's funny, like that film that I worked on, and I mean, I was just acting in it, but, from an actor's perspective, you're trying to remember your line and your part and, your emotion and all that. And Jamie Talamantes was, she was scripty on it.
Okay.
But the whole time she was watching everything that I was doing, she would come in and she goes, "Tom, that's in the other hand." And that was not, and so that is, and even as an actor, it's good to have that other person.
That's great.
That's always there. And for me, after I filmed that buddy cop film with Madison and Mike, Jamie Talamantes was on that too, as script supervisor.
She's so good.
I think it's one of the most important parts of a film, to be very honest with you. The more and more I've seen it, I'm like, man, you see a bunch of independent films that go out there and they don't have a script supervisor, they don't have anybody, and you're like, even 5 pages. 5 pages is too much without a script supervisor on it.
Yep. And it's because it's,
and a lot of people have them running sound too at the same time.
I know, right? Yeah, she does, because Jamie does. Yeah, she does sound too. That's how I met her, was on Vincent's Vow.
Right.
She was
me too.
She filmed with Kong a couple of times, but I know like Mike and Madison Strain, they are huge fans of hers too.
And she's got this setup. She's got this it's like this spreadsheet thing.
Oh my God!
Oh my gosh! I mean, it's like
first ADs.
It's like Rain Man. She's got it all like figured out, and she's got it all mapped out. And I mean, she's on top of it.
Yes.
On top of it, big time.
Yeah, the people like that. I mean, they're so they're the least, as far as like, I always think top billing or whatever. Like they're not going to get their name at the top of a post.
Right.
They're not a film by, but you can't make those movies without them. It's impossible. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's not the same movie without.
We don't appreciate those types of people because they're not
cheered as much as
we don't think they're being creative. But I can guarantee you they're being just as creative as you are. They're they're the realist in the room,
And that's exactly.
and
what I
they're
was
the
gonna say.
doer in the room.
Yep, they're the logical. They're the ones who are. They may not. Maybe they're not being super creative, but they're the ones who have to. There's still there's a script. There's a blueprint, and they're keeping us on it.
Yeah, and
So-
for those of you who don't know, and I'm not even 100% sure like what the bona fide definition is of a script supervisor, but what I can gather is this. The script supervisor is basically keeping track of everything that's going on, and then they kind of work hand in hand with the DIT, right?
I think so. Yeah, or they do a lot.
Where it's and the DIT is the guy that's taking, or the gal that is taking all the footage off the camera and logging it, so that whenever it gets to the editor, everything is in some slight form of order,
Right.
Because that's where the madness happens,
Yeah, it
is on
does.
that.
Yes, it helps when you're like. I love editing too, and but it definitely helps when you're editing your own stuff, because stuff I've shot, it's like, or even if I'm just DPing it, but I know I'm going to edit it, I'm like, no, it's fine. Like I'll know what this shot
Right.
is. But if you're just an editor who's being hired, or an editor who's just come in, you're going to be lost.
Right.
Yeah. So
If it's a short project where you're going to be doing guerrilla style filming, you
Right.
don't necessarily need to have a DIT.
Right.
It would help, but you
Yeah.
probably don't need it, because if you're going to edit it, and in the end, it's not that big a
yeah.
deal.
So you're going to DIT? Did Howie DIT? On,
How he did it.
Yeah.
Poor guy. He's sitting up there all day.
Was he?
Just
Oh,
sitting
no.
there. I mean, it was taking him
Oh my gosh.
8 hours to do all that footage.
Oh my gosh. To dump it all into.
To dump it,
Yeah,
and to
they-
log it, and to log all the sound files and everything. It
Jonna
was,
had actually reached out to me about doing that, and I would have totally have done it. I would have loved to have been on that set, because it looked like you guys were having fun.
it was
shooting on some
it
cool
was
stuff.
so
and-
much fun.
See, and but it was just during the week. I mean, I got work, so
Right.
it's like I couldn't just be off that many days in a row. And so first name, I didn't even give her another name. I was like, talk to Howie. He'll do it. He'll be great at it.
Howie was good.
Yeah, he's great. So
He was in my dressing room.
was he?
My dressing room was Howie's DIT room.
Was it?
Yeah.
Hey, that's all right.
Yeah.
Howie's a cool dude, man. He helps on. He's one of those guys too. That's like he helps on so much. Now he may not be like a script supervisor, but
He
he's
does
one
a lot of
those people
BTS stuff.
Oh my
too, doesn't
gosh,
he?
yeah, he does. He did all the BTS for our road reel film that we did. So he was our BTS guy.
okay.
Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
one of those
yeah,
things
yeah.
about road reels. They
You
want
gotta
you
have that.
Got to have a BTS too. So I edited the BTS, but and then Tyler and I did the actual film. But yeah, Howie's been on so many sets with me, like. Even my short film that I directed, I mean, he was there like every day. I mean, like just a gaffer / PA / grip / whatever.
Right.
So / gopher. I mean, he's just so positive and just loves, and he doesn't, I don't know if he has like a passion for something. I know he's not shooting things. He just loves to be in that community and be a part of it.
Yeah,
being on
but
set,
I mean,
so
like, as far as like keeping track of all that footage that's coming
I
in.
can't imagine.
Because see, they filmed that with that Sam Holder. He was
Yes,
the
yes.
DP. He filmed, and the film I'm talking about is called The Land of Milk and Honey. I actually had a role in it. Jonna Voles was the director. It was produced by Brian Scroggs. And we filmed it about, what was this? It was about the 1st of October.
I think it was like the first week of October.
And it was so crazy how this project like came about. I had no idea.
Is it a feature or is it just like a long?
From
short?
what I've heard, they're gonna market it as a pilot. So they've got
okay.
some other.
Nice.
They've expanded the story from originally what it was.
Cool.
And it was so crazy how it all started. I mean, and I've said it before, I didn't think it was going to happen. I was just being very, we've all been
Yep.
in those projects where we go, and you got to have that
Yep.
kind of stupid positive to be able to get stuff done.
Right.
But, and it just never seemed like I kind of had this sneaking suspicion in the back of my head that thing's going to go down the tubes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then sure enough, all of a sudden, boom. Okay, we're filming. And I'm like,
man.
I better learn my lines, And
That's great.
so, yeah, but, it was so surreal
Nice.
because I've always been on the other side of it when it comes to the filming or anything like that. And to be like the actor, it's so much easier.
Is it?
Oh my God.
I always wondered if it was. I'm sure it's not easy to be an actor to
it's
perform in those moments.
You're right. It's not easy to be an actor, but being an actor is really fast, quick moments of intensity.
Sure.
And it's almost enough to give you a heart attack sometimes. Whereas being the director of photography or being a gaffer or being a sound engineer, it's about the endurance of the whole day being just a butt kicker, you know? And whereas an actor, you're kind of waiting around, and then all of a sudden you got to be in character, you got to be in an emotional context, and you got to go into it, and then you get your butt kicked for about 15, to 20 takes max. And all of a sudden you're done and you want to go in the corner and cry. And, that's the downside to being an actor. Mm-hmm. But the upside is, craft services, you get to sit around and people, and I'm cool with that part of it. I was actually like, after doing that film, like, I kind of want to do some more acting because this is kind of fun. I might hang up I'll give you all my cameras and stuff. I might be done with all this stuff.
No, I don't believe that for a second.
Well, maybe that kind of segues us into, because you're a pretty positive guy every time I talk to you. You seem pretty positive. But we kind of talked before we went on. You're in essence you're an introvert, correct?
Yeah, very much so.
And so kind of talk about, what are some of the obstacles you have as far as creativity? What are some of the inner voices in your head that shut you down? And how have you been able to get around that over the last few years?
Well, I know, like, especially, that's a great question. And, I know, like, I've heard you tell me this. I've had Ducon tell me that, like, don't sell yourself short, like, because there's like this confident, like, everybody I think has that. But like, I don't know. I feel like maybe it's way more internalized with me, and like I'm the person who will just wake up in the middle of the night and be like, man, that one shot, like why did I or I said something that was wrong, like the gear piece wasn't right. I'm just like, oh my God, they probably think I'm an idiot. I'll just so it's like, but it's those things like that. Even starting out, like, so much I just did, like I said earlier, I don't want anybody to ever see this. I'm so like, and then it was like, it took a lot of prodding to get me to even like start putting stuff, like share a picture on Facebook that I took, like that kind of stuff. And so, it's, and then, but as you do it, obviously it's like, you start to feel like you're getting better at it. My pictures started to look more like stuff that I liked personally, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, okay, well, I'm getting close, and so maybe it's not the worst garbage on earth and people can see it now, but it's like, and I'm sure everybody struggles with that stuff, but it was a lot of like, it's always, and I'm still that way now. Like, I probably do a lot of stuff for little to no money just because I'm like, I don't feel like I should even be doing it. Like, I love doing it and I want to do it, but I'm like, I'm just thinking there's 10 people right next to me that could probably do it better than I could. And it's like, why do you want me to do it? And then when you're there, you just sort of get in that mode. Like, you're just, okay, there's nobody but me now. And I have to do it. If I don't come through, nobody's going to do it because then, I'm the guy.
Right.
And it's almost like that. You have to perform. And, but I love it at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, secretly, I'm just going like, oh, I just love being on. I just love hitting record. I just love like, putting the lights up and stuff. I'm not sure if that really answers your question.
Well, it kind of does, but yeah. Kind of going back on that, has it locked you up, and how do you get over that? How do you get over that hump? Because I can tell, the times that we've talked, you don't have too much of an ego when it comes to filming.
Right. I definitely try to be humble. Is that not being humble by saying you try to be humble?
Yeah, it's
the opposite.
It means you're fake.
That's exactly what it is. I'm so fake. Oh my God.
Well, and I was reading a book, and it said that Seth Godin, one of the things that it said was that ego has gotten a bad name. Because ego is one of those things that's been given to us that gets us up off of our butts. And it does get us out there to go do stuff. And it does drive us to keep going. We look at it as a negative thing, because we've always heard that person go, well, you've got such an ego. Mm-hmm. You're like, you're right, I do. But I've been working really hard for the last 10 years to have that ego. Right. Or sure. I've been working really hard for the last, like in your case, and that still just baffles me is you started doing this like 5 years ago.
Yeah, really 5.
And, you've already done quite a few, films, a feature film. Yeah. You've written, you've gotten, and that alone's given you the confidence to be able to do that. But you also you probably have a little bit of an ego.
I'm sure there's that there is.
Do you hide a lot of it?
I'm sure I do. Like, I think I try to keep it. I'm sure I do. I think everybody has a little bit.
I'm going to bring out David's ego one day. I'd like to find that.
But I also, there's definitely times where like I've done enough stuff now where like when I, the stuff that I am doing when I'm on set, like I'm usually fairly confident, like what the director wants. And then like, usually if they're asking me to do something, it's because a lot of times we've worked together, but I feel like I know what they want. I'm like, I'm thinking, okay, well, I've done this kind of, that's where the experience comes in really. And so it builds your confidence. And so, but there is a little bit of that, like, I think, while sometimes I think there's so many people who could do it better, but it's like, I also think that I'm not the worst. You know what I mean? Like I'm confident to the point of like, I've done this stuff before and I know I can do it again. And, but I definitely have like that. I have that ego where like, if there's something that's being done, there's a project and I don't get to be on it or if it's like I get jealous, like not jealous, like I don't want them to be successful, but just, I want to be a part of it. And I feel like there's a lot of things I go into. I think I can probably raise the level of this project a little bit if I bring my A game and if I show up and kick and I work my butt off. I think I can probably raise the level of this higher than what it would have been. And maybe that's ego. I don't know, but
does that drive you though?
It does,
like when other people have projects, like, cause we're all looking on Facebook now, and we all go, oh wow, they got a film part, or they're working on that, or they're working on that. And like, oh, why didn't Colin call me to come help him work on his film?
Absolutely.
So does that kind of stuff drive you as far as going, you know what?
It does.
So we look at that as a negative.
I think some people probably do,
but it's actually it's probably a positive to see that our friends and our peers are out there actually getting out and doing it. And so it is a good thing for us to get out and do that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I think you do a great job of it. And I try to be so supportive of every like project that I see, or if I come across, like when you guys did your, the little short that you did, and I always forget the name of
it. Botched.
Yeah. Dude, I called you. I'm like, dude, I need to call you.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just like, this is so good. Like, it's like,
thank you.
You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that's what that's what you should be doing. You should be happy. And I was so like, not that I didn't think you could do it, but just, I'm like, this is great. And to me, a text message or just wasn't sufficient. And I've called Dukan about things. I've called like when he told us that the film had won Best Picture, Vincent's Val. I didn't send him a message. I called him. Like, dude, I got to talk to you, man. Like, so I think there's that like caring about what. Yes, I want to be a part of every project, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be like.
It's that FOMO.
Yeah, I mean, fear of missing out for sure, man. And just like I love doing it so much, and so when I'm not doing it, it sucks. And so I want to always. That's part of the reason I say yes to a lot of stuff is because I just want to be doing it. I just want to try to make things look good, if that makes sense, and that's what a cinematographer does. I think. You're telling a story through these images, but a lot of it too, especially right now, like I feel like is making it look good while helping it. You know what I mean? Sure. Roger Deakins is like, our story, as cinematographers, we're just helping tell the story, which is true. You are, but you guys make it look really damn good. And that's what I want. That's the part of it too, is I want to make it look really good.
Yeah.
And I want it to stand out when compared to other things.
And not only
that's my ego, I guess.
Not only look good, but like set the mood, because you're looking at it from beginning to end. If you're a cinematographer, you're looking at it not just the shot, but how does that shot work with this shot and this shot? Like I was watching.
Definitely.
Well, it's like, for example, one of my favorite movies is Rocky. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And directed by Sylvester Stallone.
Right.
Because he couldn't get anybody to back him. So he had to do this film on his own. Wound up winning Oscar for
Best Picture, I think.
Best Picture. And I think I want to say he won Best Director on that. I'm not for sure.
He may have, yeah.
It's the first, official use of the Steadicam.
Yeah, Garrett Brown.
Yeah.
That's the guy's name, yeah.
And then I watched The Expendables. And you watch that and you're like, yeah, this is the worst editing I've ever seen in my life, right?
Yeah.
The cinematography in it was horrible.
Yeah.
And it was completely different than, and you start looking at things and go, they were definitely inspired by this story. And whoever's I don't know who the DP was of Rocky, but the DP definitely had a vision for the whole look and feel of the film.
Right.
And then you go and look at another film for same director, same writer, and it doesn't have anything.
Yep.
And that's where I start blaming the director of photography. It's because it's just not cohesive.
Right.
And whenever they got it into the edit bay, there was things that they go, we just can't do anything with this.
Yep.
And so if you want to blame the cinematographer on any kind of film, is you typically blame the cinematographer because they don't have that cohesiveness, and it
Right.
kind of lets you become absorbed into the film.
Sure.
Would you agree on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I always think about a good example is Roger Deakins. He's one of my favorites, but
Mine too.
But he's got so many films that he's done. So you take like, what was the Blade Runner 2049, which that movie is just, I mean, it's so beautiful. But then you look at Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption is an amazing movie. But I remember it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I actually was going through his filmography and realized he was the DP. There's nothing spectacular about the.
No,
about
it's very flat.
Yes, it's just so. And I'm sure that was his fault. It's what the director wanted, but
also too, one of the things I'll tell you about Shawshank Redemption that I think is better than like Blade Runner is go back and watch Shawshank Redemption. And this is like a deep dive for all of you. If you want to go and watch this, because I have, and I've gone back and watched it. Go and start watching it. After you get 5 minutes into the film, tell me if you start noticing the cuts in the film.
You don't, do you?
It just flows.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And that editor, whoever the editor was on that, they probably won for best editing.
They may have.
Because you can watch that film and it's like a song. Yeah. There is no cut. You're so right. It just moves along. Yep. Now, Blade Runner, I can't say that because I think Blade Runner it's more.
I would agree.
They're more individual pictures, and it seems like that to me.
It does feel like that a little bit, and I think I love how even the first Blade Runner, but it's just like taking you see if you just laid out shots, single frames from Blade Runner and then single frames from, you're just like, okay, well, yeah, Blade Runner must be better because it looks so much better.
Right.
And it's like, but no, this one's, I think Shawshank is better. And so, story-wise. And it's editing,
it is.
Yes. And so the cinematographer can definitely be like, I think it's really, to me, that's interesting because he's so good. And he was so good back then that it's like you're a lot of times you're at the behest of what the director wants, but sometimes I think maybe because I've seen movies where it's like, that sometimes to me the cinematography will take you out of something because it's not this, it's not Shawshank because that movie was just sort of fit, but I've seen movies where it's like it just feels off and it just there's just not it just doesn't filmic enough to me. And maybe that's my opinion. Maybe that's exactly what the director wanted. But to me as a DP, you're obviously going to be there for the director, but at the same time, you work so closely, you got to speak up,
Right.
and you got to say, maybe this doesn't work, or why don't we try this, or whatever. But and ultimately, it's the director's decision. But it is interesting to see you can have one really good DP and two completely different looking films.
Yeah, and I think it's important to. I mean, you're gonna have. I mean, there are different types of films out there. I mean, there are obviously films that are more of like your art house films, and those are a hodgepodge of whether they're going to be beautiful or whether they just tell a really funky story and they have some funky camera angles.
I mean, really, yeah.
But I think, to me, like the way that a film, it's like, again, and I'll go back and I'll talk about The Big Lebowski. I like and that's a Roger Deakins film, but I like The Big Lebowski because there's not a lot of those edits that I feel hit you over the head.
Right.
And that's really, really hard to do. Like we've talked before where there's like great films that you see, and then there's films that are horrible with great scenes. Right.
Great moments and great scenes,
there's a great moment in an otherwise bad movie.
Yep.
And so that to me that kind of falls squarely on the director of photography. If the film is a bad, like, what is the worst beautiful film, which I think we talked before was like Aliens 3, right?
Yeah, that was another one. That was one that I loved.
That was a beautiful bad film.
Yeah, it is.
And there's a reason for that.
Right.
I mean, that's a Fincher film.
Mm-hmm.
And did he lens that?
No,
he had.
The original DP got sick or something, and they had to bring in somebody else.
That's the story. He probably either
he
got
probably
sick
got
or fired because
yeah.
there was who was the original?
I don't remember.
Wasn't De Palma, was it?
No. I'm trying to. I could probably look it up. I feel like it was not Jordan Cronenworth. He's worked with him. I think it was his dad that ended up DPing it.
Yeah.
You're
right. It was his dad that did it.
I think, is that right? His dad. I know his dad did Blade Runner. You can look it up.
You keep talking.
I'm going to keep talking.
I'll find out.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's I actually thought about. That's one of those things. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, I didn't answer that question very well to Tom, and there was another, and now I can't remember because I thought of another film that was a beautiful, terrible film, a beautiful, bad film, and I cannot remember what it was now. I should have written it down. It was a great example too of a movie that like I just love to get in and I just want to watch it because I like how it looks and I don't really care about the story. I run into that a lot with Zack Snyder's films.
What's that?
Where his movies look really good, but they're not Zack Snyder. But they're sometimes even J.J. Abrams like when they did what was the movie about the little kids and the alien? You know what I'm talking about?
Not 8. It's Super 8.
Super 8.
Yeah,
that's a movie. It's beautiful, but this story kind of falls apart towards the end, and but I love watching that movie because it looks
David
so good.
Fincher directed Alien 3.
He did. That was his directorial debut.
And then let's see, director of photography was Alex Thompson.
Okay.
Which Alex Thompson, we're on the IMDb page. Alex Thompson also, he did Legend.
Oh,
that is a good.
Legend is a great.
I love Legend.
Film. Yeah, that's a good looking film.
He
too.
did.
I love how we're just looking this stuff up.
Demolition Man.
Okay.
Cliffhanger. Alien 3.
Mm-hmm.
Legend. Labyrinth. So he had some pretty, and those films are not too. I guess he did The Saint.
Okay, with Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
So he had some Excalibur. Do you remember Excalibur from the 80s?
Dude, he did some really
those are really cool.
Sword and Sandal.
Yeah, those are kind of neat films. He did Hamlet with Kenneth Branagh. So he did.
I like that one.
He did some pretty cool stuff. So, anyways, yeah.
But that's definitely a movie that.
So, what was the other good bad film that you?
I was trying to remember. I don't remember what it was. I was saying I thought it was one of those questions where I was like, oh no, I just what a terrible answer. Not that that's not a good answer because I secretly have I secretly like Alien 3. I know it's not a good movie, but I'd like it. I don't know. Part of it's the cinematography. I just love to watch it, and anything Fincher does is always good to watch. He's great with his DPs, and he doesn't always use the same one, but they always look so good.
Right.
And I think part of that's he has such a great
eye for it.
Yeah. And that's like,
I mean, that's how he got his start. He was filming like music videos and commercials, right?
Yeah, he was doing like Madonna music videos and all sorts of crazy stuff. Or he does a lot of, maybe Paul Thomas Anderson is he still to this day shoots Radiohead music videos.
Really?
The last movie that Paul Thomas Anderson did, which was, what's it called? The Thread. Oh my gosh, my brain's not working.
Not Phantom Thread.
Phantom Thread.
Is it
That's
Phantom
it.
Thread?
Yeah, with Daniel Day-Lewis.
The one that made Daniel Day-Lewis quit acting.
Yeah, basically. Paul Thomas Anderson directed it and is the DP on it.
Really?
He did all of it. And I had heard things, or not like I heard things like somebody told me, but I had remember reading things and watching some stuff about some of his older movies, or I say older, but some of his like, the movies leading up to that, where he was always sort of like at odds with his DP, and he always wanted to like. There was this rumor, I guess, that he just always DP'd his own movies. He had so much control over what the director of photography was doing. He basically was just doing it himself. And, which is, I guess, is fine. I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson,
Thomas Anderson could call up either one of us, and we would totally be like, hey, you don't need to put my name on it.
No.
Pay me what he gets paid,
right?
And I'll come in and I'll run that camera.
I'll be a shutter release.
I'll hit record.
Yes.
And I won't fight you at all.
No, well, not. So,
no, not at all.
Exactly. So,
So, Paul Thomas Anderson, if you're listening, you got two guys right here.
Yes,
we both know how to push the button on a camera. We can even set aperture if we want.
We can.
Or T-stop.
T-stop.
We can do all that.
Now, I think he shoots film. We might be in trouble there.
We'll figure it out.
We'll make it work. He's going to do all the work anyway.
That's where you get the gaffer guy over there with the light meter. Hey, run that. Yeah. See what we get on that.
Yeah. So, but there will be blood is one of my
oh yeah,
all-time favorite and top 3, maybe my top movie ever. I love that. So,
I like the movie. It's just a little long for me.
It is long and I don't know, man. It's so good. It's so good. I could watch that movie literally every day and never get sick of it.
I hate the last act of that film.
When it's like pushes, it's like skips forward to like 1927 or something.
Yeah,
and
I hate the last
act. His kid's grown up. Yeah. And he's really terrible to his son.
Yeah.
Finally tells his son that he's not even his kid.
Just a bastard in a basket.
Bastard, you're a bastard.
My God.
Milkshake. He chases that guy around with the pin.
It's just flat horrible.
It was pretty bad. I mean, I love it, but I totally get it. It felt such like not even like a juxtaposition. It's just like it's almost like a little tiny different move. Like, not that the tone changed, but you're like, wait, like
you see the complete destruction of a person.
Right. We saw him be awful and be awful and be awful. And then all of a sudden we jump forward like 15 years, and he's just, he is to the point. I mean, he's literally telling his son that you're not my son. So yeah, but I still love. I don't know.
It's not one of those movies I can watch over and over again because I would just be like,
I love it. Part of it is the cinematography. I love that. You can tell that it was shot anamorphic.
Like, if you ever see me in a bad mood, they go, Tom, why are you in a bad mood? I watched There Will Be Blood last night.
Oh no, man, I'm sorry.
I just feel like a bastard in the basket right now.
Yeah, no. So. I've let us off the rails again.
No, so. That's and that happens
talk forever.
So here's what I want to kind of round this out with.
Sure.
Is want to go through what are some of your biggest mistakes that you've made in this process in the last 5 years, and how have you gotten out of them? What have you learned? What's your takeaway? And then I got one more question after that. Okay. But that's kind of the big thing. I think learning from mistakes is the best thing, and it's the most effective.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so what would you say is, probably one of the biggest mistakes you made getting into this field? Maybe going down the wrong fork a couple times on the road and having to backtrack and get back. I mean, what's the one that kind of stands out for you?
I know, like, this is probably not the worst mistake, but just as you were saying that, I remember doing this when I was shooting weddings, and this is not really like, this is just sort of like one of those you're an idiot things, but ceremony came, and when I would do weddings, like, I would have a mic on the officiant, and I would put a little lav mic on the groom, and so then between the two of them, you could pick up the bride. 15 minutes before the ceremony starts, I would go in and put it on them, and then start it, and then stick it in their pocket. Well, after the ceremony was over, it was beautiful. Like this, they read their own vows. The groom just like bawled all the way through his. They were passing around tissues between the bridesmaids because he was super sweet. It was just amazing. After the ceremony, went and found him and the officiant and took their mics off, and both mics, I somehow managed to not hit record on either one of them. And so I don't know if that's like, that's just like I would say it was a rookie mistake, but it was probably like my fourth wedding. And I cobbled together audio from the cameras. And I told the bride and groom that I had screwed it up. And I honestly think if I hadn't told them, they probably would have never noticed. So
never admit
you've made a mistake.
Never
Sometimes
admit defeat.
That's right. So, as far as like mistakes, like, you mean talking, like on set, or you just mean like choices that I've made? I'm talking
more from a mindset mistake.
Okay. Gotcha.
Making a wrong decision that probably wasn't. It's like just to give you an example.
Sure.
I spent a lot of time. This podcast is an example. I could give you a million examples, right? But you get into this mindset that you base your life's passion on someone else's outward kind of mask of things. It's not accurate, but you get so hung up. It's that Facebook mentality of things where you look at it. It's just like what we were talking about. And there is a plus side to it because it does fire you up, but sometimes it can really like cause you to, kind of just want to give up because you go, I can't run that race the way that person's running. And like for me, is like today, I got up and I was looking at, the people that were looking at the podcast and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden it just clicked in my head. I said, stop doing this. Run your own race, man.
Right.
And it's kind of like, do you ever find those kind of things happening to you? And, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I definitely have I guess I've got a couple of examples. I don't want to talk for too long, but, because I know you want to wrap up, but just kidding. We could talk for hours. I know how it is. You and I we talked for 4 hours last time.
Right.
So, and we just finally had to make ourselves stop.
You got to pick your kids up today though. So
yeah. I'm like looking at my watch a second ago. I'm like, okay, we're still good. We're still good. I got like an hour. So, but yeah, the first thing that I thought of as you were kind of giving your example was that because I've made lots of mistakes just on set, exposure and all that kind of jazz, or just not doing something right. But I think one of the first things I got into, that one of the first mistakes was that I thought I had to have all the most perfect gear, and I thought that without the most perfect things you can't get, you're not going to be any good.
You can't create.
Right. And so I bought a camera, and it was I just used my Canon 6D, which is what I use for photography. But it was even then I started making stuff, but at that point they started having the GH4 and the GH5, and I'm like, I don't have this camera. And I for the longest time, I was really shy or just worried that because my stuff wasn't shot on those cameras, that people would immediately know it, and it would not be any good. And then it was I finally got to the point where I had been shooting weddings on that 6D, and people liked the weddings, but when I would shoot the weddings and I would edit them, and I'm watching through them, I'm done with it. I'm watching, and I can feel myself reacting and smiling at these moments, and the music that I've put on it, and I'm thinking about, I'm happy with what I put out. You're never fully happy, but you know what I mean?
Right.
But I was...
You want to George Lucas it all the time.
Yeah,
right?
you do. So you want to go back and fix it. But it was I finally had to I really honestly did have to get to the point to where I had to trust that the way I was shooting it and the way it ended up was I was happy with it. Like it looked the way on the monitor, the way I pictured it in my head, and that was okay. And I had to get to where like I trusted my eye, and and get to the point to where you're like, okay, I can make images that look good with a camera that's just a photography camera.
Sure.
It's not really meant to be a movie camera.
What is that to you? I mean, you've been in this headspace for a lot over the last 5 years. What is that to you?
You mean like what is the right picture in my head?
Well, no, I mean, you've obviously had to get over it.
Yeah, for sure. So
I mean, we all do at some point because we just don't have unlimited funds. We don't have a studio that's given us anything. So how did you just get over it?
I mean, it was really just a matter of, like I said, it kind of helped that I was doing weddings. People wanted me to keep doing weddings, if that makes sense. And so that sort of combined with, I was editing. I was happy with them. When I would look at them, I'm like this. But in my head, I would think, okay, well, this looks okay. Like this looks
right.
When I'm in that moment, when I'm shooting it, it looks the way I want it to look. The depth of field is right, the exposure is right, and then when I'm getting and editing, it's like, okay, this looks like it's all the same. It looks like a little movie, and so it just took doing that a bunch, obviously, and it took like having a lot of shots that I didn't like, but it was really just doing it over and over and over again, and really just sort of little by little you get confidence, and then you start to just, I guess, believe in yourself. I don't know,
confidence. Yeah.
So
did you, kind of like what we said earlier, the enemy of done is perfect.
Right.
I mean, do you ever run into that where it's just like, I can't give this thing out because it's just not, it's not perfect.
Yeah. What's kind of interesting is I definitely am that way. And one thing that I guess I've been lucky is that I've not really had a lot of stuff that that's like some super hard deadline.
Right.
And so I've had things that I can put together and I'm not happy with it, or there's moments of it that just don't, I'm like, gosh, I wish we could, but then I just set it aside.
Right.
And then when I come back 3 weeks later, a month later, and watch it again, I can't remember what I did.
You forgot.
Yes.
You forgot, and you look at it with fresh eyes.
And I say that to so many people, that preconceived notion.
So let's break this down a little bit, because this is to me, this is a really important aspect of, at least from, like, I think even photography, this kind of bleeds into photography a little bit too, because I've chimped a camera, and looked at it and go, oh, that shot sucks.
Yeah.
And then you look at it a million times, you're like, that shot sucks. And so then you finally get back and you look at it. So that's just from the photography side. But if you look at
that's where mine started when I used to do. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. So
that's why you shouldn't chimp your camera.
You shouldn't.
Number one.
Chimp it to make sure exposure's okay.
Right.
But then just take.
Yeah. Don't necessarily like get too over involved with the composition on it, because the composition is probably good if you have any chops shooting a photograph.
Yes. Trust what's in your viewfinder. What you're seeing. Yeah. So.
But anyways, to unpackage this, and I'll have you help me out, is that, so like, for example, you go through a 4-day shoot of filming something, and you get done with those 4 days of shooting, and you typically, if you go back in and look at it like the night of or the next day, chances are you're not going to be happy with anything that you've shot.
Right.
Because what do you?
No, I mean, I'm the exact. And
why do you think that is?
I think it is. I think it's because that I always use that term, that preconceived notion that even when you're, especially with, it started with
your
photography,
inner head vision.
Like I was talking about, trusting what am seeing in my head, and then I finally can get it to where, and this may be more like exposure and that kind of stuff, like trusting what the camera does and seeing it with, but
well, there is a reality aspect that's in there too, because what's in your head is an idea at that point.
I mean, even like some of the stuff we shot on Sibylline, which was our road reel, there's a couple scenes where it's like, where she's sitting at the desk and she's working, and even looking, and when she's tied up at the end in the chair and he pulls the hood off of her, there's definitely some, even looking at that with my own eyes, not through the camera's eyes, but with my own eyes, like I knew what I could do with it in post. I knew what I could do with color and make it look even better than what it looked like with my eyes. And so, but getting back to what you're saying, like I've gotten to that point because I spent so much time just hating everything that, like, not hating everything I shot, but having, you know what I mean? Like you said, you shot for a day or 2 days, and then you, even on a wedding, and then you're like, you start going, I finally got to the point where I would dump it and I wouldn't even look at one clip because I knew I would not be happy with it.
So the fix that you and I have agreed upon that we typically do is that you let it sit for about, I would say, a week or 2 weeks, sometimes.
A week for sure, yeah.
Until you forget a lot of your shots and you forget the anxiety that you had while doing it. And what happens is then you pull it out and you start looking and you're like, hey, this looks pretty good.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, that shot went together really good with that. That's really easy to cut through.
It happens almost every time.
Yeah.
Overall, you're like, okay, yeah, this looks, I'm happy. But you're right. It's the preconceived notion and what you've got in your head, and even what maybe you and the director talked about. You think you've got it, and then if you go back and watch, you're like, oh, dude, it's not there. We didn't get it. But then it's like, you have to forget about it.
So that's kind of cool, though, that when you think about it, is because that initial idea that got you really jazzed up and got you like, hey, we can make this happen, right? Mm-hmm. It looked great in your head. You wrote a script based off of it. You started putting it all together. It made sense to you. And it's enough to get you to the next step, which the next step is actually assembling, the team and filming. And then the next step is filming it. And then that's when it turns into, that's when it's not an embryo anymore. It's actually a living being.
Right.
And then that edit is when it grows up. Yep. So it kind of has a lifespan.
It does.
All on its own.
It does.
And then once you get it out there and let people see it, that's when they start putting, it's like, like go back and think of Star Wars, okay? George Lucas wrote Star Wars. He had an idea. He put it all together. Right. When he filmed it, and nobody knew the magnitude that was going to go.
Nobody I was going to say nobody predicted it. There was no predictions. Yes, it was never going to be what it ended up being.
And
there's no way it was
40 years later, there's a religion based off of it. There's like, you go back and look at it and think of like all of the things that people were talking about, like, oh, this is what George Lucas, are you kidding? George Lucas wasn't thinking that when he did that.
Absolutely.
He didn't know what are those crystals that they used to make the
Kyber crystals.
He didn't know what a Kyber crystal was.
No.
He had no idea.
No. He might have had an inkling of something, but there's no mention. If he really had
the Clone Wars, when they make that brief mention of the Clone Wars in New Hope, you're like, he didn't know what he was doing.
No, he did not.
The dude was 21, 22 years old. Yes. It's so bullcrap. Yes. But that's where you start to see the metamorphosis and the marination of a film and an idea. It starts here. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you saw the original pre-concept drawings of Star Wars and then what ultimately came out of it later on, it was nothing the same.
So crazy.
It was nothing the same. And I think that is a good point for us to realize whenever we do something, is to appreciate that part of the process, because that part of the process is what gets us up and going and gets us excited to get out there.
Right.
But don't get hung up on it, because if you get hung up on it, it's never going to get done.
Right.
It'll never get done. And if it does, and I've actually,
you won't enjoy it.
I've heard of quite a few people, just as of lately talking with, because of this, you talk to them and like, oh yeah, we filmed this thing back in, 2005 and it's still not done.
Yeah.
And you're like, seriously?
Like what?
And there's a bunch of that. I mean,
there is. Absolutely.
Can you imagine how many great films are sitting on someone's hard drive right now that have never been edited?
I know.
Or they just didn't have the ending titles put in.
Right.
Or there's one section on it that the scene just didn't work and the audio sucked on it and they needed to go back in and fix it. I mean, think of how many great films are sitting out there right now.
Yep.
And because they didn't have a good distributor and they didn't have that figured out or they didn't have this figured out. I mean, the next great American film is probably sitting on someone's hard drive because they are too chicken to put it out there.
Yep.
That's scary, dude.
It really is. But it's the truth.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where,
Well, they say great films go to the edit bay to die.
That's
right?
exactly, yeah, I know, right?
I think Mickey Stone told me that.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, I think he did.
Oh, God, Mickey is the best. And he's such wisdom, too. He really is a good guy. He's a wise man. But yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. And that's one of those things, too, is like, if you're going to do this, it's like if I'm going to get a bunch of people together, and we're going to go shoot something, then we're going to put it out there, even if it's terrible.
Right.
We're going to put it together. We're going to put it out there because it's one of those things where like you're going to learn something from the experience, no matter what. Everybody's going to be a little bit better.
You just inspired me.
Oh,
you just inspired me. I'm going to write it down while I'm talking to you. Keep going.
But yeah, it's like, even on bad sets, or not bad sets, but films that aren't very good, and especially when you're first starting off, if you think the first movie you make is going to be the most amazing film, just know immediately it's going to be bad. I'm not that probably discourage some people, but just know
Who cares?
that it's not.
No, it's not going to be any good. Just get over it.
But go make it.
Yeah.
And then learn from that, and learn what your audio needs to be better. Maybe the cinematography, or even just your blocking. Simple things as that. Just even your shot selection. Like maybe you should have gotten more coverage, or maybe you didn't really need all that coverage, or whatever. And then in your edit, maybe it should have been simpler. Maybe you didn't need to cut away so many times. You should have just stayed on this 2-shot. All these little things that you start to learn.
How true does this statement sound to you? All right. Because this is something that my wife and I were talking about the other night.
Okay.
And the same thing came up. My wife said, I don't want to discourage you. It was about the whole podcast thing. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. If something like that discourages me, was it ever meant to be?
Dude, yeah, that's good.
I mean, isn't that the truth?
That's exactly the truth.
So we're going to totally try to discourage you on this podcast because this is none of this easy. It is all a ton of work. It's a ton of time.
Yep.
It's a ton of putting your blood and sweat and tears into something and ultimately getting rejected.
Yep.
But if that doesn't discourage you, keep doing it.
And I think that,
and bring it on, because that's honestly that's where it is.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I talked about that a little bit. It's like, before we started rolling, but it was like you made the point of we were kind of talking about people who, if you're getting into this to be famous, or if you're getting into filmmaking just because it sounds fun, you're not going to last very long probably, and you're not going to enjoy it. So you have to be okay with standing out at 12:30 at night in 32-degree weather when it's raining and about to start sleeting for 4 hours. And
I know exactly what
your number one goal, and you like literally. That night on Vincent's Vow, like I literally melted the shoelaces on my shoes because we had space heaters.
I have
in the garage.
BTS footage of them melting. Yeah,
like we were putting them up there, and then it would so close to it that the heater, because my toes were so cold, and it would start. You pull your foot away, and then your foot would just not smoke, but it would just the water was evaporating. But you have to be like, you have to love it so much that you're like wanting to. And I think that's kind of it. Like you and I both, I think we have this like itch, we have this like drive to do it inside of us, this passion, this obsession to do it inside of us, and there's no like. I think to myself, there's like my kids, and I'm always going to put them number one. But then it's like, man, I always joke because I'm single and I'm divorced, and whatever that situation might have been, but like, I always tell my daughter, she asked me a couple of times, she's 17. She's like, are you dating anybody, Dad? And this kind of stuff. She just worries about me, I think. I'm like, yeah, finally I told her, like one day, I was like, yeah, I've been dating this really, really, I was like, I've actually been seeing somebody who's really going great. We spent a lot of time together. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's filmmaking. That's what I do with all my time. But I love it. You know what I mean? And so maybe it's not healthy. Probably not. Probably some psychologist will listen to this and be like, you need help. But
you got a girlfriend. Her name is Ari.
It is the Ari. Her name is Sony. But like it's like I love to do it, and it really does take up every free moment that I have, and sometimes not even free. Sometimes I'm in the shower, I'm driving down the road, and it's constant. So you've got to, I think you've got to kind of have that drive and that want to.
Yeah.
Because it's not. You're right. It's not easy, and it's a lot of disappointment, maybe in the end product, but the process is always fun to me. But
the way it's been described, the way that I've described it, and I'm going to beep this out because there's only really one way that I can describe it, but it is 98% dog shit with about 2% of sprinkles on it.
yeah.
And that I don't want that to mean that that I look at it unfavorably. It's just that 2% is enough, and it is crazy awesome.
It is.
But there is a lot of pain and blood and all that other stuff because it's all about rejection.
Yep.
It's like, it's like even like this podcast, you put this out. I mean, now everybody knows my name. They know where I live,
right.
And they know where to go. You're an idiot.
Yes. Oh
you don't know what you're talking about.
You're not talking about how tough filmmaking can be and just the process, and it can be hard. It is hard work, and you're going to be hot and cold and exhausted. And you're going to be up like 36 hours straight and stuff like that. It's not to discourage people, because I think there's something good about like what you're doing with with this podcast is you've got this itch, you've got this need, this drive, this desire to like do this thing. And I'm sure it's just, you keep thinking about it, and you keep thinking, okay, it just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And I totally get it. And, so I think those are the kinds of passions and that I like to be around people who are truly passionate.
Obsessed.
Obsessed and absolutely, man. Like I've worked with people who they have fun and then when they're offset, they go back and they live their life, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I like the people who, when I get with them, it is like with you. We don't talk about anything else,
right?
But filmmaking. That's all you hunt and fish, and I like to hunt, but we don't really talk. We talk about filmmaking. That's
The funny thing is like I go down there with those guys that I hunt with. Never talk to them about any of this stuff.
See,
it's
like a secret part of your life or something.
Like actually, I got kind of confronted the other day by one of them. They're like, you don't ever talk about like what you do and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's my recharge time. You know. Sometimes when I go home, if I have no signal out at deer camp, so I can just sit there and I don't have to worry about any distraction. I can sit out in the woods and, think about my next great film or whatever. I got little
about your podcast.
I take note cards with me and I write down all my little ideas. I've got a million ideas here that I write.
I do that same. Down. I've got my little note app on my phone, and I've got all kinds of stuff that I do in there. So I'm the same way, man. So, but you're right. It's like there's like when I go home to see my brother and like my parents, like I will talk. They'll ask me about if I've been doing anything, like filmmaking wise, because they know how much I love it. But I have to I'm bad. You can't like open that door for me because I will put you to sleep.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And then everybody gets annoyed with you.
And then you just watch their eyes just glaze over.
Oh,
it's like
too.
it's one of those like. I warn people, like, I'm going to put you to, and I have to consciously, literally consciously in my head say, David, stop talking.
Right.
Stop saying what you're saying because they don't understand how much you love it. And so, and again.
Well, that brings up that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because something happened to me. This was 10 years ago. All right. Right when I was starting my business, and my brother's a musician. He plays in a band. Well, in his first band that he was in, the lead guitarist was a director of photography.
Okay.
His name is Jay Pelzer, great guitarist up in Jefferson City. Anyways, one night after the show, went up there to hang out with my brother, and me and Jay started talking out on the back porch out area of this place where they were playing.
Okay.
And my brother came up and he was like, "Geez Louise, come on guys, you can talk about something else besides that all the time." And I thought for a second, I was like, you know what, jerkwad, Musicians are a dime a dozen. There's a million of them all over the place. But how many people pick up a camera and know how to edit and set all the... And so when you get around people like that...
Yes.
I mean, it's
It's like
a
a
diamond
drug.
in the rough. It's like, hey, and you can start sitting there talking about all that stuff that was sitting in your head for 6 months that you've been like loading up on, and go, man, that sensor and this kind of stuff, what do you think about that? It's like you finally get a chance to talk to somebody about it,
Yes.
And that's why I wanted to do the podcast, is because I wanted to have that people that, you hope that people can get out there and start talking about some of this stuff, because it doesn't get talked about. Not at least around here, because we're too busy working on projects to be able to like sit down and have a drink and like sit and talk about it. So that was one of the main reasons. And I always thought it was kind of and that's why I've always enjoyed talking with you, because when we can sit here and we could talk forever. Here's the last question that I want to I want to ask you. And this is probably more of just a gearhead question.
Okay.
So of all the pieces of gear, like, because there was, in 2020, there's been a lot of stuff that's dropped that looks really cool.
Yes.
And could take your filmmaking process into a lot of different directions. Be it lens, gimbal, camera, which one looks the most promising to you, and which is the one that you kind of go, I think I would like to go that direction?
Definitely. I mean, 2020 has been kind of crappy, but if you're a gearhead, it's actually been pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Canon has like, and I don't, my favorite camera, I think the thing that I would want to buy is not a Canon, but Canon is starting to really catch up to Sony. Like their
that
mirrorless
C70
stuff.
looked really cool.
That C70 for sure. And so they've always had great cinema cameras, but they're really starting to catch up with like that Sony, that price range,
right?
$2,000, $3,000, $3,500 range. And so, but like I shoot, most of the stuff I shoot is on the Sony A7 III, but the A7S III to me is like, I love the Sony. I couldn't ask it to do anything else other than the color on the A7 III is not always been super great,
right?
And it didn't shoot 10-bit internal, and it didn't shoot 422 internal.
We'll beep it,
beep
just
it.
for the heck of it.
For the heck, that's awesome. But the new A7S III, that's the thing that gets me most excited about the A7S III. And even one of the things that I like about the Blackmagic, the Pocket 4Ks, even in the 6Ks too. I like the 6K because it's a full frame or a full frame sensor, but all those cameras, what they have in common, the A7 III and then those two Blackmagics, is that they will shoot 10-bit color internal and 422 color internal, and that like the Sony A7 III.
Why do you like that?
Well, so the Sony A7 III shoots 8-bit and 420, and so when you get into color grade, you're talking about that many more pixels of information, that many more, like you're talking about shades of like the color yellow from this end of the yellow spectrum to this end. You're getting so much more data to be able to manipulate skin tone and manipulate maybe, bringing up saturation in just the greens or whatever it might be. You get so much more information to be able to play with. Is it in essence
your ability to mimic the red camera and the fall off?
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
because you really like that kind of David Fincher-esque kind of fall off that he has on a lot of his stuff.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, go watch a David Fincher
You'll
film.
see it.
You can definitely tell the way because he shoots with a red.
He does. I think a lot of the time.
All of his stuff since Social Network's been on the red, hasn't
it? I think so. Especially, I know a lot of the
House of Cards, that was that on a red.
I think a lot of that was, he uses it for a lot of stuff. But he loves digital, and we're blessed. And that's one thing too, is if you're getting into this, or if you're you're into it, but you want to, you don't. I always see people talk the red, the RA, and those are cool cameras. But I'm telling you, we live in a world where the Pocket 4Ks, the A7S IIIs, those things are gonna give you just as good an image. I'm telling you, if you put them next to each other, the average person that's going to watch your movie is not going to be able to tell if you shot it on a red or not.
Right.
And besides the fact they're not going to care. And there's bells and whistles, and maybe you get a few extra little things, but being able to shoot S-Log or C-Log is to me the greatest thing ever, because that's all I ever wanted after
Right.
shooting 50 weddings on a Canon 6D. I just wanted a little bit more dynamic range.
Right.
Please, God, give me the ability to manipulate.
God, give me dynamic
Give me
range,
dynamic
please.
range, please. You know what I mean? Like, that's all I wanted. And so, so I'm shooting in 4K. I don't care about shooting in 6K. I don't care if I can shoot in 8K. I don't care. I just want to be able
Do
to
you
have.
care between APS-C, micro four thirds, or a full frame?
I prefer full frame, but or
why is
APS-C only because
The depth of field.
the depth of field is the biggest. The bokeh. But like, me, I love my ND filters, and I love to be able to shoot shallow. Shallow. Even at weddings, like I'll crank that shutter so I can keep my aperture low.
I absolutely hate ND filters. Let me just say, it is.
I like them because it lets me keep my control, but they are annoying.
I mean, let's face
have
it.
to fidget.
For the last 5 to 6 years, right? Sony, Panasonic, Canon, Nikon, whoever,
Right.
they've been marketing these cameras. Nobody's taking photos with these cameras.
Oh my gosh, no. If I want take a picture, I grab my 6D and go take pictures.
Right.
Yeah.
Put a dadgum ND filter
Inside
on it.
them. Yeah.
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 You know
agree.
what? I would pay the extra $500
Yeah.
to $1,000
Yeah.
to have internal
And-
ND filter on a
Right.
DSLR or a mirrorless body.
Right, and that's one of those little perks that you
conspiracy.
get. It is. I mean, if you're an ND filter, if you're a Tiffin, whoever makes it, which they make
Polar
great,
Pro, those guys, yeah,
you're
they've sunk so much money into it.
right. So that's one of the perks, I guess, if you want to shoot on a red. I mean, obviously you're going to get red raw, and you are going to get more dynamic range. I totally get it. But for what we're doing, I mean, I'm not. You can. We live in a great time for filmmaking, because
Yeah.
you're not trying to learn how to expose a film that only goes up to 100 ISO or 100 ASA. I've got a Sony that I can crank to 5,000 ISO if I want. It's like, we live in a beautiful world
Yeah.
for filmmaking, in my opinion, with the cameras that you have now. And you don't have to buy the Pocket 6K. You don't get the micro four thirds,
Right.
and yeah, depth of field. But even then, the depth of field is not going to be. Nobody's going to notice that it's less shallow, or that bokeh is not quite as round. You know what I mean? You'll notice.
Excuse me,
Yes.
David. Your bokeh is not fuzzy enough in the background.
Exactly. So it's like, you know what I mean. But it's that's the kind of things that. But as far as the camera, like, that's what I was excited about. I'm like, man, you can get these. I've shot on the Pocket 4K, and it's great that you just get more information. The more information, the better.
It's definitely a better.
So-
The Pocket 4K is good as long as you've got it on a tripod.
Yeah. Yep.
That's
I've tried
the
to fly
downside of that camera. It's a tripod camera.
Yeah, and I've tried to fly one before, and like on a,
It doesn't.
it
doesn't fly well.
no, it doesn't, and it was like trying to fly that red on,
It's trying
on
to
Vincent's Val.
It's trying to fly a Cadillac.
It is,
Is
yeah.
what it is.
Yeah,
or
so-
a Mack
and that's
truck.
and that's why if somebody set down the Pocket 4K in an A7S III, or in a Pocket 6K full frame in the A7S III, I'm going to pick the A7S III because it's smaller, and you still get just as good an image. And in my opinion, again, I'm not a pixel picker,
Right.
you know what I mean? They both look amazing to me. And so I'm going to pick the one that's lighter, that I can put on a smaller gimbal. I don't have
Right.
to have some big, huge, heavy thing to carry it around.
To me, and I, like I said, and not to get off on a tangent, I really like the Black Magic 4K camera. I have one.
great.
It's a great little camera.
Absolutely.
The problem with it is it's functionally obsolete. That form factor is functionally obsolete. The best thing they could have done they sell a line of monitors, right? They have the Blackmagic design monitor that costs $600, right? Make that sucker into a square
Yeah.
modular piece that can be flown. It can have all kinds of stuff done to it. And the whole back of it is nothing but that awesome little touch screen that they have, and then
Right.
slap a monitor on top of it,
Yes.
folks. And that would have, and it would have, you wouldn't have had the battery issue that you had on it, because that big, huge 5-inch monitor on the back of that is what's running the battery down on it.
Yep. And then you've got
just give us the color science and all that stuff that you got, Blackmagic, because it's great.
Color science is
great.
It's better on Black. It's definitely on.
But they misfired on that one, in my opinion.
They did, and like the couple times I've shot on the Blackmagic, the Pocket 4Ks, like that was the biggest thing, is that like you have to have this huge V-mount battery stuck on there.
Yeah, so you're spending $900,
right? And I know people would say, and I'm not an expert on any of this. These are just
he is an expert on this. Don't let him tell you that.
These are all just from my experience and my budget, But like people are like, well, they shoot on Reds, and but I don't have a Steadicam operator with this this super crazy expensive Steadicam that can carry all this V-mount. I don't have that stuff. So then I got to look at it like, well, what can I? And again, we are lucky that we have the Pocket 4Ks and we have the Sony that we can get these beautiful images out of, and we can do with them what we want. Like I can have my little cheapo, newer off of Amazon tripods to put my little dolly on, and I can slide that little A7S III, because the thing only weighs a pound and a half, and so.
If anybody wanted to know really quick, like how we get on a tangent,
this is
how it happens. We can sit and literally do this
for hours
and hours. David,
yes,
we got to call it a quits,
I know,
man.
dude.
We got it. We're an hour and 42
editing.
minutes. Yeah, I only have about 15, 20 minutes to edit off this.
You can knock out 15. You can knock out 15.
I may not even take any of it. I may just
say,
the heck with it. We'll just do it. Thank you so much for coming back in. Really quick.
Sure.
You have your film, Emily. No. Oh, well, you did. And
we do have it. We haven't even released it yet.
You haven't released that one.
It's
so
just sitting on my hard drive.
DP'd that one. That one's sitting on the hard drive. That's coming out probably next year sometime.
It's got it. Yes. Jonna was
in it.
Yes,
Mickey was in it.
Mickey
and
was
Damien
in it.
Costello was in it.
Yeah. So.
So you got that coming up. Then you've also got The Pictures, which is the film that you wrote,
shot, and directed. Yes. It will be terrible. I'm just kidding.
It's not going to be terrible.
No, we have great cast in this too. So Madeline and Wes and Courtney McClellan, those guys did a great job. So,
if anybody out there is listening, and we can get a venue when the world opens back up,
right?
There's a lot of us right now, I think, that have some films that we haven't been able to show and get our Jones on. And we need to figure out a way to get like a weekend festival, like
we do,
really impromptu, where we can all show some of our stuff, have some little talkbacks and stuff like that. I think it'd be a fun event.
Yep.
And like try to do something like in the summer or in the early to late spring next year, and just have some time where we can all go out and like put our stuff out so we can all sit and watch it.
Yep.
And
I've seen some stuff that people have sent me that they've done, and there's so much really good stuff that's floating around that nobody's gotten to see yet. I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Like, I want to watch your proof of concept stuff that you did, because those look good, and I also want to hear how you guys did it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think we need to get a bunch of us together, and we just need to set a date and just say, let's have a showcase of what we did around here, and let's, only the creators and the people that were involved in it can be involved, and we're not going to sell tickets or anything like that, but we can just go out, we can all pitch in and see if we can figure out a way to do it. So
I would love it. And there's some people's stuff I've seen that I never worked with, that I would love to like.
We need to do this.
Tell them how much I like it. I want them to know how much I like, dude, this is so cool. And maybe we can work together sometime. You know what I mean?
We'll call it Sato 365.
There it is. Yes. Yes.
Because it took a year to get all this stuff off and out of our plates.
Yeah. I mean, I've got another one that it's called A Look in the Mirror, that we literally just need to get like 3 pickup shots, literally just exteriors of a house. And then it's basically done. So there's just, I've got that one
we've got 3 or 4 in the hopper that we haven't even finished out yet. We just need to
Yes, I've got 3 right now on my hard drive at home that are basically done. So, yeah.
All right. Well, David, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
I love talking to you, man. We're going to do this again.
Here, dude. Yes. Yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah, we'll do it again soon.
We need to. So, good luck with the podcast. And I haven't watched your first one yet, or listened to it yet, but I'm going to, because I haven't been on Facebook all day, so I didn't know it was.
Golly.
but I'll check it out.
How do you do that? How do you not get on Facebook?
I don't know, dude.
This is how we keep talking.
This is it.
This is how
Thank
we keep
you,
talking.
Tom.
Thank you,
I appreciate
David.
it, man.
Love you.
Love you too, bud.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast. Analysis of your biometrics have been compiled and calculated. You are now a minuscule part of the collective. Enjoy the rest of your pitiful day.